What's up guys, in today's video we are going to be breaking down the 2017 version of Justice League, or as a lot of fans are calling it now, Josstice League, in preparation for the Snyder Cut when that drops tomorrow. And I just want to go through this version because hopefully after today I'll never have to watch it again, and just go through it scene by scene and just figure out what exactly went wrong and what, if any, are any redeeming scenes from this movie. When Justice League came out in 2017, it had a load of generic problems, a very unmemorable generic score. It looked too bright and shiny and didn't really fit with the continuity visually of Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman. And it had a lot of that Joss Whedon humour that went well with the Avengers, but really didn't work with these DC characters. So let's start with the opening scene, which is the phone footage from the kids interviewing Superman. And apart from the horrendous kind of Botox facelift that the CGI gave Henry Cavill, I really like this scene. I think it kind of captures the essence of Superman, talks about hope and the S, and really like that analogy of winding like a river. And it kind of sets up his absence for the rest of the film as being a really missing presence. But then we've got the next scene, which is Batman trying to capture a parademon, and for me this really exposes several of the problems that Justice League has. Firstly, in Batman's portrayal. This was a character who in the last movie could somewhat hold his own against Superman and had one of the best fight scenes in a superhero film of all time with his warehouse fight. And here he struggles to capture a generic henchman, and we see it in all the big action set pieces to follow. Batman is only ever seen sort of tackling one or two parademons and struggling to do that. So already he feels like a tame presence, coupled with the fact that he then just starts bantering with criminals about an alien invasion. Don't need this scene. I wish they'd just gone from Superman's phone footage straight to the opening credits, because this scene really adds nothing to the narrative. Then we've got the opening credits. Batman vs Superman also kind of had an opening credits scene that was used to give us a very brief run through of Bruce Wayne's origin story that we've all seen many times before. I do like the kind of juxtaposition it creates between these big wide scale shots of Superman being mourned by nations, and also these really kind of, personal intimate shots of crime rising and the neglect of society without his presence there. I thought that worked quite well. And then we get onto the kind of Avenger recruitment opening act, which is, where we get introduced to all the heroes, and we start with Wonder Woman taking out the terrorists. Nothing wrong with it, just a kind of generic opening action sequence. But structurally, I don't feel like this scene was meant to be this early, and I'll talk about that a bit more later. But then we get Bruce finding Aquaman, and I think I've read somewhere that this is the opening scene of the Snyder Cut, which will be really interesting. And the main thing I'll say about Batman finding Aquaman is that it just feels like a very clipped scene. It doesn't feel like we got the full scene here, and I'm interested to see the extended version in the Snyder Cut. Specifically because it's a very anticlimactic entrance. We just cut to inside a hall and Batman and Arthur Curry are there. There's no anticipation of the two coming together. We cut from one shot to the next and they're both just stood together in a hall. We then get Aquaman and Batman fighting alone, and Aquaman basically saying, "No, I'm not going to come and join your group." Cringe banter followed by some awful green screen as Aquaman disappears back into the water. And then we get onto the first scene of the film that I actually really like, Bruce and Alfred. Whenever these two are on screen together in this film, the scene tends to be good. They have a really good chemistry. I love Jeremy Irons as Alfred. I think he's got such a good dry wit and sass. And, talking about their history with exploding wind-up penguins, it just helped to sell their relationship and their history and how that's all changing with the type of threats they're now going on to face and how unprepared they ultimately are. Barry Allen's introduction is a scene that I really liked because it works on two levels and it really doesn't feel like there's been much tampering with it. It successfully establishes him as the comic relief, which I think Ezra Miller performed incredibly throughout, but it also establishes this kind of emotional relationship with his dad, and It felt really raw and really believable, and the only problem I have with it is that it feels very incongruous with what's come before. You know, it's the first scene that feels very dramatic and powerful, and like one of these superhuman characters is really human. That then leads us into the scene with Cyborg's introduction, so another father-son relationship between Cyrus and Victor Stone. But like with the Aquaman scene, it feels like we're joining scenes too late. You know, the scene with Victor's introduction doesn't feel like we're being introduced to characters. You know, we're 20 minutes into the film and we've already met all of our main superheroes. And that just doesn't feel right. While in Avengers, that's okay because we're just catching up with those characters. We've seen them before. For a lot of the characters in this film, this is their first scene. And it feels like we're just churning through them to keep the runtime down. But there's clearly a very strong dynamic to Victor Stone as a character and his personal struggles that I know a lot of the reviewers for Zack Snyder's Justice League are saying that he is really redeemed as a character in that film. He is really the centerpiece of that film. Then, unfortunately, we get what is, in my opinion, the best scene of this 2017 film, which is where Steppenwolf is introduced and we get the Amazons fighting against him on Themyscira. This was a really incredible action sequence, and this should have been the introduction we got to the parademons. I feel, you know, we like I said, we didn't need that scene with Batman and just that lone parademon at the start. They should have come out as a massive force here like they do. Then we get the lighting of the fire and the arrow that kind of signals to Diana that there's a threat coming. And this is where I feel that the structure of this film has been played with massively, because I think the Amazon sequence was supposed to precede Wonder Woman's introduction completely. I think we were supposed to get this introduction and then that would build up to Wonder Woman's introduction into this film. But because we've already got that scene with her being introduced earlier on, it feels like it doesn't carry as much impact. If Wonder Woman's introduction had been from this arrow and this kind of call to action, I feel like that would have been a lot more powerful for her. Then we get the scene with Lois Lane and Martha Kent. It's a nice scene, it's just weirdly situated in this film. I feel like there's a lot more of them that was left on the cutting room floor that we're going to get. And I'm also unsure because I know that the Martian Manhunter is supposed to be possessing her at some point in the Snyder Cut. So I'm not sure at what point Martian Manhunter is actually Martha Kent, but I'm somewhat worried that in the Snyder Cut it's really going to devalue the power of having those two on screen together. Then we've got Bruce and Diana meeting up. I really like their relationship. I think the film could have done a lot more to explore the burdens of leadership that they both suffer with. But that leads us into the kind of Steppenwolf flashback, which I really loved as a flashback sequence. I think Zack Snyder is going to extend this sequence a lot, which will be fantastic, because I'm hoping it'll be like the opening of Man of Steel, where, you know, you get a good 10-15 minutes on Krypton with this massive action sequence, or even like the opening of Lord of the Rings Fellowship, where you see everyone taking on Sauron. I think it's going to have that kind of weight and scale, so I think that's going to be fantastic to see. Only thing I don't like is the horrendous exposition in this sequence. Wonder Woman's line, "They don't contain power, they are power," is just yuck. You know, like what does that even mean? Bruce Wayne recruiting Barry Allen, I really like that scene. I think there's definitely a kind of underlying hint that Bruce feels a sense of protectiveness and care for Barry Allen being someone young throughout this film, especially considering that Batman versus Superman scene that shows either Jason Todd or Dick Grayson's armor as, you know, a victim to the Joker. Only criticism of this scene is the brunch joke. It just feels like a kind of carbon copy of the Avengers shawarma joke that plays into both end credit scenes in both of those films. Victor and Diana, both characters who've kind of shut themselves off from the world, so I think their dynamic in this scene is good. Again, it feels too short. But also, we are 40 minutes into the film at this point, so we're a third of the way through, and the majority of the film so far has just been one-to-one talking. And this is a film about otherworldly invasion, so there is not really a sense of scale being established. It feels very small, and when you compare that to Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman, there was definitely a sense of real impact and real threat. And that is seriously lacking in Justice League. Then we've got Aquaman rescuing the fishermans with that epic slow-mo, drinking his whiskey and walking off into the stormy waves. This should have been his introduction scene. This is such a cool introduction and really establishes his, carefree, no nonsense, I'm just gonna do my own thing vibe, which leads into Steppenwolf getting the Atlantean mother box. Quite a cool but brief action scene. But then we get one of the worst scenes of the film, which is Aquaman and Mera. This film came out before Aquaman's standalone film, so this is kind of a tease into his relationship with Atlantis. So it feels very disconnected from the main narrative. It's mentioning characters and histories that we have no idea about, and also there's just zero chemistry between these two. Then we get the first shots of that family who become a recurring presence in the final battle. I get what they were trying to do by framing the effects of a massive alien invasion around just one family and contrasting the destruction to a mass population, but again it contributes to what I was saying about this film feeling small. It just makes the threat seem insignificant. All of those scenes should have been cut. They just distracted from the flow of the film, and especially in the final battle, it distracted from the main action. Then we get Steppenwolf monologuing about the boxes and the unity, and it feels like every other line from Steppenwolf in this film either has the word unity or mother. He's really a generic one-note villain. Then we get J.K. Simmons as Gordon. They were really casting these iconic Batman characters with some powerhouse actors, which is why I'm so gutted we're never going to see Batman's standalone flick with Deathstroke. I think it would have been the best film in the DCEU, especially with Ben Affleck writing and directing. That leads into Barry meeting Diana, awkward banter that I think works well in this scene. And that leads into the first big action sequence with all these characters who come together. Love the kind of tunnel setting. I feel like it's a very different location for superheroes to fight in. It feels grimy, it feels gritty, it feels like it complements the Gotham location really well. Things I liked about this scene is Steppenwolf's line, "My axe is still slick with the blood of your sisters." Loved it. And when they launched the missile at him saying primitive beings, great. Some of his dialogue established him as a real threat that just didn't come across visually through his physique on screen. And I love Batman's little pep talk to Barry Allen about, just save one person and then you'll know how it feels. Batman taking on that role of a mentor father figure again, and I like how this relationship develops. Also love Aquaman's 11th hour save right at the end to hold back the water. But there's also a lot that I don't like about this sequence. Again, Batman is slow. He doesn't feel like this kinetic force of just sheer will and power, especially considering he fights one parademon, gets thrown into a wall, and then says, "Alfred, I need the Nightcrawler." Like, what? They did Batman so dirty in this film, especially in this sequence with his lines, "Jesus, he is tall," and "Sorry guys, I didn't bring a sword." It makes him seem like a character who's not taking this seriously, which is just so out of character. I'm also hoping in the Snyder Cut we get an explanation of where Aquaman's suit comes from, because there was just absolutely none in this. Loved the armor, but, where did it come from? He seems like a character who's not in touch with his Atlantean roots here, so why does he have this Atlantean armor? Another recurring problem in this film is Flash. Every scene where he sprints, he trips over. They're trying to portray him as this unprepared recruit, but there's no sense of development with that. He literally falls over in every action sequence in this film. But then we get the first scene where all these heroes kind of after the tunnel fight come together in the Batcave, and it feels underwhelming. It feels rushed. It feels like a petty argument between Diana and Bruce. It's this petty bickering that attempts to recreate that scene from Avengers in the helicarrier, which worked because a lot of those characters like Thor and Iron Man had huge egos, so that kind of petty bickering felt somewhat organic, whereas Diana and Bruce are very mature characters. And I think there's a really painful irony in that the first time we get these heroes together is basically to discuss the fact that we're not enough and we need to revive Superman, which I'm not sure how Zack Snyder's cut is going to handle it, because I think it's what the entire film hinges on, is coming up with a reason to revive Superman that doesn't invalidate the presence of every other hero in this film. Because that's what it feels like. It feels like these characters only exist in this film to revive Superman. because he comes in at the end and kicks Steppenwolf's ass like it's nothing. But after this heated argument, we get another gem of a scene between Alfred and Bruce, probably one of my all-time favourite scenes from this film, which is where Batman says he's more human than I am when talking about Superman. And it does feel like a line I think Joss Whedon wrote, but I think it's one of the most profound lines of dialogue that captures Batman's character and his relationship with Superman and the difference between them, in that Superman is someone who attempted to assimilate to a human life, whereas Batman has always existed on the periphery. And it's just this beautifully intimate and vulnerable moment between Alfred and Bruce that exposes Bruce's insecurities about why he can't be a leader and why Superman needs to exist in the world. Then comes the next section of the film, which is all about bringing Superman back. Now, the grave digging scene, while it was a nice bonding moment between Cyborg and Flash, it feels wrong that they're the ones digging up Superman's body. Bruce is the one trying to lead this charge to bring Superman back, and it's like he's just letting the B-list Justice League members do his dirty work for him. That feels wrong. I think this scene is a kind of panic that we're this far into the film and there's not been enough interactions between the Justice League, so they've shoehorned these two together to have a little bonding moment, which is nice, but it doesn't feel right within the context of the story. Bruce should have been there to dig up the grave. Now, the resurrection in the Kryptonian mothership I liked, mainly because we get hints at that Hans Zimmer score that comes back, and the score is so lacklustre in this film that every time you get that little bassy bit of Superman's theme, it just sends shivers down my spine. Don't know why after he resurrects he's shirtless and doesn't have shoes and socks on but still has his trousers on. But that leads us into the scene where Superman kind of forgets who he is and has a bit of a confrontation with the other Justice League members. Diana's line, "he's back," feels so corny and unnecessary. When Cyborg's interface starts to overpower him and takes a shot at Superman, and Flash is just stood there looking at him, you think, you've got super speed, why can't you just move him away? Then we've got Aquaman, who really doesn't get a chance to showcase why he's a superhero in this film. He kills a few parademons in the final battle, but really he's just a punching bag in this film. Superman just twats him away like it's nothing. And so does Steppenwolf quite a few times in the final battle. But again, the real disappointment of this scene is Batman. Their standoff feels really pathetic, and "yup, something's definitely bleeding" is one of the worst lines in this film. Lois Lane arrives, kind of brings Superman back to reality, and then they both fly off back to his home in Kansas, reinforcing the fact that Lois Lane really doesn't have a role in these films beyond her connection to Superman. She really doesn't function as a character in her own right without being either a romantic interest or a damsel in distress for Clark Kent. And again, this interaction has a chance to kind of sell the emotion of Superman coming back. And all we get is a joke about him smelling nice. You know, it's a real miss of an opportunity to tap into this idea of resurrection and what it means for the loved ones he's left behind. Then we get another awkward group scene with the Justice League in the Batcave as they kind of figure out their next move to tracking Steppenwolf. They have a joke about talking to fish. This movie has clearly cut out a lot of scenes of these characters starting to understand each other and connect with each other, which is why all the group scenes in this film feel disconnected. There's no sense of a united team because, well, for the simple fact that this film hasn't shown us a united team. Then we get the scene between Bruce and Diana that I really like, but all that does is kind of expose the lack of camaraderie and chemistry between the Justice League, because there is a real sense of understanding between Bruce and Diana. I don't know why she's got this kind of red scarf on. I like Aquaman's suit, that's unexplained and, pointless. But it's where these kind of parents of the Justice League, if you like, are admitting their flaws. We cut back to Superman just before the final battle. Now he's got a shirt on. But when you think about it, Superman's return feels so unearned in the final battle of this film, because he only gets 2 scenes where he's himself, and they're just 2 very brief scenes of him in the field with Lois Lane. It's just this, oh yeah, I remember who I am, I should probably go help. We know in the Snyder Cut he goes to get his new suit, we know he goes to see Alfred, so we know there's a bit more build up and progression to his return and contribution to that final battle. which is what's lacking here. It doesn't feel anticipated, and it doesn't feel like he's earned his right to come into this film and steal the thunder. Again, like I said earlier with Martha Kent, their relationship was one of the most beautiful things to come out of Man of Steel, and again being present in Batman vs Superman. His relationship with his parents is so strong, and there is always such a clear resonance with that. But the Martian Manhunter twist in Zack Snyder's cut is really going to undermine that in terms of the emotional impact of them reuniting. Then we get another boring scene of Steppenwolf in this horrendously coloured setting for the final battle. We know in Zack Snyder's original cut it's a lot darker and a lot more in keeping with that gloomy colour palette of Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman. There's a real visual tapestry that this film just shits on. Then Cyborg locates the mother boxes, and we don't really get any kind of suit up scene. It's just hopping onto Batman's ship and off they go. So this film doesn't really play up at all the significance of these characters coming together. And then we get that final scene on board, which attempts to kind of shoehorn some last minute chemistry between the group. Definitively feels like a Joss Whedon scene. Then we get Aquaman and Flash having that little bit of banter at the end of the scene. Really the only time they interact in this film. Another problem. We don't get these smaller moments of characters like that interacting. I quite like this idea of Batman just decided to, go in as a one-man army, draw all the parademons away. But then once we get the whole team deciding to go and back him up, it just feels a bit corny. The red and purple colour scheme just doesn't work at all in this sequence. Love Aquaman's little action sequence in the air and his screaming, just an overexcited child having great fun slaughtering henchmen. Wish we got some more of that. And then another problem with this final battle is that it builds up to Superman's return by making the League seem weak and powerless. Rather than have Superman come in and help out, Superman comes in and saves the day. It shouldn't be that these heroes are incapable and Superman needs to come and do it for them, which is how it plays out here. Plus, using the Superman theme from the Christopher Reeve films doesn't fit right with this at all. Where is that chilling Hans Zimmer's theme? Danny Elfman really butchered this score for the film. And Superman's line, I'm a fan of truth, but I'm also a big fan of justice. Unnecessary. Also, when Batman and Superman reunite and they give Batman another cheesy line, I don't not like you. It's like this awkward reunion between two children trying to make peace. Batman's dialogue in this film feels so contradictory to who he was in Batman vs Superman. And then once they break the unity and Cyborg and Superman are joking about wanting to die, it just feels like awkward banter. And Wonder Woman's line, I work with children, is cringy but also true. These characters are presented as children in this film. That very glorified shot of them after the battle is going to look so much better in Zack Snyder's, with that kind of crisp golden sunrise as opposed to this awful highly saturated version. And then we get the final montage kind of showing each character going back to their lives and Bruce and Diana planning for the arrival of a Justice League. I really like Bruce and Clark's bonding over Bruce being able to buy the bank. That's about the only kind of banter between the two of them that I think worked. But again, the nature of the montage just feels rushed. It just feels like too neat of a way to tie up an already compressed film. It just feels like a hurried dispersion of these characters who've only really just learned how to come together. So that concludes our dissection of Justice League, a very flawed film that hopefully Zack Snyder's cut is going to rectify. I cannot wait to see that 4-hour odyssey when it drops. It's going to be my next review, so stay tuned for that. Please be sure to like and subscribe and follow me on Instagram. Hopefully this video wasn't too painful or too PTSD inducing for those of you who had to relive that experience of going through Justice League again. But with Zack Snyder's cut dropping tomorrow, hopefully we're never going to have to see Joss Whedon's version ever again. As always, thank you for watching, and please stay tuned for my review of Zack Snyder's Justice League, hopefully coming over the next few days. Thank you for watching.